Hello and welcome to the DnD420 podcast. This is a show dedicated to helping those become a better dungeon master. I'm your host, Eric M. Hunter, and I am a struggling game master trying to figure out how to tell a better story. Joining me shortly is Jimmy Shields. He is the creator of DnD420 and an avid D&D fan for over 30 years experience. In this episode, we go over how important it is to have character names and attributes at a moment's notice, how important it is to not necessarily put all emphasis on stats with these characters to kind of liven up your world. We also talk about how important it is to really feel out every single environment using all 5 of your senses to really give that immersive player experience. Okay, so from the last time that we talked, I was given some homework. The homework was to create basically 10 characters with 10 defining traits, I guess you could say. Very nondescript, kind of what I would consider generic, which was fun. And then I put together a couple of environments. Now, since we're playing in the Star Wars universe, there's a ton of environments already, part of the universe. And I didn't want to take too much liberty with those environments, just because a couple of those environments are iconic and for very important reasons. So I feel like farting around with that would probably throw things off and kind of confuse people, maybe. But anyway,
Well, I think you did exactly what I thought you might do, and it was kind of a trick anyway, because what your how would I put it? The basis for these places is excellent. Both of these, you got base 1 and base 2. The idea behind both of them is awesome. We got a cold, desolate, once formidable force against the Empire, now lays in ruins. That's really cool. Never-ending snowfall, poor visibility, very few places to set up any sort of camp. Great battle once fought here, but now only ghosts roam the ever-moving hills. The abandoned buildings still smell of blaster fire, and a once great army's technology lays to waste in the barren snow. That is awesome. This is a cool place. It's a place I want to visit. I want to poke around. The question I have for you is, what do I see? What engages my senses? I got the buildings still smell of blaster fire was the only little bit in there that does that. So I would challenge you to take it a step further. Like, what does blaster fire smell like? Or when we see the snow, let's talk about how cold it is. Is it a biting cold? Can I feel it through my gloves? It's so cold. Does the wind cut here? Is it cutting in through wherever I've got less coverage, like where my jacket meets my pants? Do I catch gusts of wind there? Things like that really get people immersed into this snowy environment without having to change anything or taking any liberties whatsoever. Engage one of the 5 senses or several of the 5 senses and do it a couple of times. This way, when the players arrive, they know what it feels like when that wind cuts through their coat. They know what it feels like to feel the cold through their gloves when they're digging through snow. Do you know what I mean?
oh, absolutely. Because to me, I know exactly what all that stuff is, and that's something that I find that I continue to lack is like, well, yeah, just because I know what it is doesn't mean that the players know what it is. And sometimes even with a quote unquote, well written environments, such as a lot of these spots in Star Wars are, there's still things that go amiss that obviously from watching the movie or reading the books you don't get because you're not physically there. And maybe this just is a testament to Dungeons and Dragons, but like that gives you the opportunity to experience those things that you couldn't with a different medium.
Exactly. The movie is all about visuals. So when we watch Star Wars movies, we're seeing really cool stuff. And if you want to capture it like a movie, watch this environment and find little things. Like, talk about the breath, the way the breath forms into steam, or talk about anything that's just a cool visual. But if you want it to feel more like a book, like kind of what I do, go into the other senses for sure, man. How does it feel? Do you get frostbite? Do you feel your toes going numb? All these other things, and it might even not even be things that we have experienced, such as frostbite. Not everyone's experienced true frostbite. However, we've read about it before. We've seen it happen before. We know what it is. So, but I like to engage those senses. I like to get pretty deep with them to where if you start engaging the senses through environment, then it's a lot easier when you set up a tense situation to evoke emotion.
No, that totally makes sense. Because even that can have effect on how somebody might go about their next move, or
Exactly.
just again, it goes back to those things that as a player you take for granted. So I know we mentioned this off the podcast. I don't know if we talked about it in episode 1 or so, but in your world, you don't have a north, south, east, and west. You have other words that represent those directions, and the reason that those words are different is because at least this game that we're playing now takes place underground and these giant chasms of rock, so there wouldn't be these cardinal directions of magnetism. Like it would be this side of the rock or that side of the rock, I apologize, I can't remember what the words are. But at first,
Yeah, because
go ahead.
north is based on a star, south is based on a star. Those names we get from
Exactly.
stars.
Yep.
So there are no stars in the Wilderdark, which is the name of the area. Um, and in Volcaminar, and actually in other parts of the Wilderdark, they wouldn't even use the same words that they do in the Wilderdark. It's just not a thing. You don't talk about north, south, east, or west. Each place is specific to um, its own area, and we do use, like in Wilderdark or in Volcaminar, I'm sorry, we do use the gatehouse as a central location. Which side of the gatehouse are you on? Are you well side? Are you nether? Are you vor? Those are just some of the directions that I've used. Um, but it engages more and it makes you think. Well, this is where I am. I can't look up and see the stars. It's just a constant reminder. And the same thing rings true with each of these locations. When you get there and you start to tell what it feels like, and then let's say the players come here, we get frostbite in our fingers. You get that feeling in your nose when you breathe in air that's too cold. It feels like crystals inside of your nose,
Yeah.
and it kind of stabs you, and as you're breathing, that's something we can all relate to. But if you do all those things and you set it up well, the next time we come here, we all automatically get that feeling, you know,
Right.
and that's important. And the same thing for your second area. It's a city that has sprung up simply for the need for trade and for conversation, but it didn't go into what I see here. And it's another thing. Let's just engage those senses. Let's talk about, what do I see? What are the first? Because that's all this other stuff is great, and I might know that as a character. I might even know that this place is that. But when I get there, I need to know what I see. What is the first thing that jumps out at me? What are the characteristics? What are the little things that make this? Do I see a building that's all smashed up and it's actually like the shape of Maine? You know what I mean?
Right.
Or there's little things like that that you can do that'll stand out and give character, big time character. And we'll always remember if it's something really interesting or really unique or something that made us feel a way that we felt in the past.
Okay, so to me that brings up two questions. So the first question would be, so like you mentioned before, like the directions are based on stars. So obviously there's no stars here, so there is no north, south, east, and west. Like,
And yeah, and Volcaminar, yes.
right. And it's kind of similar with like months of the year. So like there is no January, February, March, because that would basically mean that Rome existed at one point and that those
Right.
months were so. And as somebody who's creating a game, I get all of that completely. Is there a point where it's too much information? Like it's too much change?
Yes, that's a good question. There is a point. Now it depends on your players what point that is. Do your players want to learn the months of the year that you've rewritten with nonsensical words? Because I like literally January is a nonsensical word to us.
Right.
February is it only means one thing, you know, and obviously they were based on names of people at some time. That, like you said, they lived, and this is a Roman thing, and that's where we get most of the names. August is, based on Augustus. So that to me is a lot. I've renamed, and I've got a whole lunar calendar in my game for the outer part of the world, not Volcaminar, that has month names, day names. It's Urintide, Fuerentide, because it's based on the tides more so than the moon. They don't. That's why they're called the tide. They don't call them months. They actually call them tides. We don't talk about that in game because I think it's a little much for you guys, and I may work that in later. But it feels like a lot, and you're right about that. Sometimes that can be too much, and it's okay to go ahead and just say it's January, February, March, April. If you've got a sun and seasons and all those things, that's okay. I don't like to do it. I'll never say it's January. I'll never say it's Monday. Um, you won't hear those things. I won't even say it's the weekend because that's not a thing in the game. We don't have a 5-day work week and 2 days off in our D&D game.
Or in real life.
Or in real life in this day and age. But that can get to be a lot, and you talk to your players. They may yearn for this sort of thing. I slowly introduce a few new words into Volcaminar, like Kleiner and Schlecht, and I only wanted to put a couple in there. They're both German words. They're real words. None of
Right.
us
That's
know
the
German.
currency.
Kleiner is the currency, yeah, and Kleiner just means lesser, and so that's why it's called Kleiner, is because it's a lesser silver piece. And if you remember how I described them, they're usually smaller. They're not consistent. They're not an exact weight, probably because they've been shaved down. They're not perfectly round. They don't have smooth edges. And they have a simple K embossed into them. And that's simply because the dwarves don't want to give humans or elves the same currency as them that would put them on the same level. They were looking for a way to segregate even further. And a Schlecht just means shit. Um, and so calling somebody a Schlecht, well, and I think it has a little deeper meaning than that in German, kind of like some of our swear words,
Sure.
but essentially it just kind of means shit. So I use it as a nickname that's the term that dwarves call non-dwarves, Schlechts, or even Kleiners. They might call you a Kleiner because you're a lesser person. So now in one of my games, they've really picked up on those things and they love it. The dwarf throws around Schlecht or Kleiner all the time, where the players try to keep away. The other players that aren't dwarves try to keep away from those words because it's offensive and derogatory. And that helps do the same thing that the different directions. Now I've added in 4 new directions. I've added in a couple of slang words. And that's enough for me. That's as much as I want to do for you guys. Not that I haven't done quite a bit more. I'll just slowly incorporate that in over time. And you guys can pick up on it or ignore it. And I'll let you decide as players in my game what you want. How much depth do you want? How much homework do you want? How much do you want to have to read? How much do you want to have to memorize? Most of the time, now in my main game, this is never the case, but most of the time, your character sheet is enough for the player. We don't need all these extra words. We don't need all these extra things. And I like to give out a synopsis. That's what my website is for. I'd say, hey, I'm going to send a link to Volcaminar. That's the only thing you need to read. You don't have to know it forward and backward. there's maybe a couple of portions I'll point out to you that you would know this forward and backward, but I don't want the players having to do too much to get it to be, like you said, when is it too much? That can be a fine line depending on your players.
Yeah, and I can speak from just experience of playing with your games. Like when we were talking about the shaving the shields down to basically to make more, and how that was a real thing. Like that blew my mind because it's like that small instance and that little detail in the game, it like has such a large story in and of itself that may or may not affect the actual game that we're playing in time. But like it makes my character feel more aged. Like it makes the world feel more lived in, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
And that's the entire goal of that sort of thing. The Kleiners have been shaved. You can't trust humans with anything from a dwarven perspective. Um, they're poor and they're going to do what poor people do, and that's desecrate things that are holy. And the dwarves look at their money in this particular game as something that's kind of not necessarily sacred, but we can use that word because they honor the dead, and the faces of the dead are stamped on those coins in tribute. So why would I want to give that to a human who's just going to shave it down and desecrate one of our great ancestors? And that gives you the entirety of why the dwarves do what they do, and then it says a whole lot, like you said, about the city that we're in. And I don't need to tell you anything else once you realize that, oh, the Kleiners look shaved down and oblong, and not much time has been put into them for this reason. You can take away a lot from that, and it's a small detail that made a big difference.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Like I was really blown away because it like so much just kind of came into clarity once like we were talking about like what that was and what the process was, and I was like, man, that's just, I mean, again, like it makes the world feel lived in, which is, as a player who's looking for those details, is like those are the things that I feel like would be a win. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I did my job right. Like I did this thing, and it made this player feel a particular feeling. Like, okay, I did that right. So, so I guess when I was writing these locations, I was taking for granted what I would have considered to be just known facts that, oh, well, if I put this down, then it's irrelevant. But you're saying that like nothing is irrelevant. Like the more the better, because in any instance, you know, when somebody says or tries to do something, and it's like, well, I mean, your hands would be freezing at this point, like because it's so cold. You know, it's going through your gloves. Well, if I wouldn't have written that down, I wouldn't have. You know what I mean? Like I
You
wouldn't have
may
thought
not
to
have
do
thought
that.
to say it. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I might do exactly what you've done here, except for I might even paraphrase a bit more and shorten it. Kind of most of the stuff that I write for the game isn't this detailed. It's a lot more detailed and it's a lot less detailed. Um, I might just write abandoned base, lays in ruins, lots of snowfall, poor visibility, um, the site of a great battle at one time, and then I would write blast or fire smell. I might write feel the cold through the gloves. I might write when you take the first time you breathe in, and just as a reminder, that way I can tell you it takes your breath away. Or, you know, and I might put a lot of little bullet points that are there for me to pick from. And I may choose one or two of them when I'm describing the area, and I might just scribble on that, like, okay, little star, I've used that one. Little star or a little check mark, I've used that one. And then I got six more or something. And then they go to open up this uh, gate and they go to pull on it, but they've taken their gloves off, and you feel your hand stick to it because there's a little bit of sweat and condensation on your hand. You've just grabbed cold metal. And so I might put that on there as one of the things, and then all of a sudden your hands stick to it. You know, it's another thing to to immerse the player in. So I do bullet points. You can do. I know a lot of DMs really like to write in-depth. What would it be called? I don't even know what they call them because I don't use them.
I guess just synopsis or just.
Yeah, a block of information
Yeah.
about the area that they read to they straight up read it to their players, and that's a really good thing when you're doing modules. That's how they're written. That's what you do. And I write a module like game, so I have that as well, but mine are bullet points, so that way when I'm talking to you, it doesn't sound like I'm reading. That's what I hate when someone reads to me. That's a personal thing. So for me, I don't want to feel like I'm reading to someone or have someone feel like I'm reading to them. We're not in third grade. And it also makes it just seem a little bit more, I don't know, a little more, I should have wrote some stuff down. DnD420, man. It makes it seem a little bit more flow. Go with the flow when I'm just talking to you and you're just talking to me.
Right. It's not like we're being personal one-on-one, and that's, oh, wait, I have to read this textbook excerpt real quick.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I personally like that better, but however you want to do it, as long as the information is there, being presented, that's fine. Because a lot of the times, if I go to read a block to my players, and you will know this for sure, they're going to interrupt me. They're going to say, well, what do you mean by that? Or what color is this? Or what does that look like?
Right.
And I'll never finish, 12 sentences. I'll get through 2 of them, and you got Tommy going, well, what is she doing? What do I hear? Can I get a spot check?
What's she wearing?
I got to finish this block first. So, I mean,
yeah.
As it comes, there are certain things I need to get across. For instance, if you come into a room, I start describing the room, and there's an earthquake that's supposed to happen, and I let these idiots start looking around. I forget the earthquake to describe the earthquake and be like, no, guys, it's trembling in here. It's when it came in and an earthquake started. Oh, I forgot to say that because you got to have certain things that you have to get across and certain things that you make sure you want to pepper them in to tie us to the area, to make us feel immersed. And like I said, I love bullet points. All these things are all bullet points to me. My entire game is a series of bullet points.
No, and that makes sense because there's definitely been times where, like in games that I've ran in the past, where I was like, oh, well, I want this really cool thing to happen. And it's like, oh, yeah, no. Well, hold on. Wait, guys, wait. No, hold on. Just let me get it. You know what I mean? And you become, at that point, I feel like you become kind of like fighting against the group to get whatever cool thing that you wanted to get across, which may or may not be cool. But at the end of the day, it's like, it may just not be where they want to go. It may not just be where the game takes them in their minds.
Right.
So, so the characters, I kind of caught myself halfway through feeling like I was doing this wrong. And what I mean by that is, so I'll be straight up with you. I'm terrible when it comes to names for people. So I just go to a generator and I just get a name generator, and then I just select whichever ones I think are neat. And then I'll just use those because I don't know. I'm terrible when it comes for names for stuff.
That's okay. These names are fine. I mean, I know they're from a generator because I use generators as well, and I can tell that they're generated.
Yeah, they're really good.
They're pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, they're way too good for me to come up with.
They fit the Star Wars universe, so there's nothing wrong with that. And there's lots of good name generators. You can just search online, name generator, and you will get several options. Use the one that fits. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't use them a lot. I might use them when I get stuck, like, well, what does a dragon's name sound like? Shit, I don't know. Let me go dragon name generator.
Right.
Here's 5 of them pop up. Let me go see what each one. And I find the one like, that does feel very Draconian. I will use that style. or I might even take a little bits and pieces of the syllables and consonant.
Right. It's not Stan the dragon, you know.
Right.
So
So the names are fine. I like the names.
okay.
You got some cool ones here. Jodo Stod, Torque Cole, Loman Rollins. These are cool. These are good.
Yeah, I thought they were neat. So one of the things I kind of caught myself halfway through, and I was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna finish what I'm doing, and then we'll just talk about it later." Was so taking what that we talked about last week in terms of like less about stats, more about the background, more about the personality. I'm like, okay, but I kept catching myself because as you see, like all of them have a title or not a title. They all have a job,
Yeah,
and then they have
okay.
some weird thing about them, some quirk.
Good. That's good too.
I don't know. So I feel like I'm pigeonholing these characters. Like I feel like they should be more about the personality traits and less about the facts about them.
You need both because a religious leader has certain things about him in your mind that you're going to play. You might not ever say that Jem Larimore is a religious leader. You may never even say that in game, but he acts a certain way. And he has a certain mannerism to him. You can say religious leader, and if that strikes something in your core that has you role play a certain way, that every time you go to him, that you role play that way, that's fine. Now, these aren't words I would use for myself, but use what works for you. Like for me, I have, and I think I mentioned it in the last one, a list of 1,000 character traits. And I'll scroll through these 1,000 character traits and I'll pick out the ones that work. And some of them are pretty clever. Or I'll roll for them and just get these absolutely random things that don't even go together. But if you find a way for them to go together, then it makes it even cooler because we all know some really quirky, strange people that have possibly traits that don't go together.
Right.
It doesn't even sound like that guy could be real, but I work with him. Yeah, he's real. You know, just to do one right now. So I roll a 447, go down here, and we see this guy is going to be indolent. Okay. And 105. He's cautious, yet indolent. So that gives us a little bit to go on.
Yeah.
So
you just have these. So when you create these characters, like obviously you're creating them because you feel like you're going to use them at one point, but how? I'm trying to think of the right way to ask this. What is the importance level of these characters? Is it just open range where it's like the party runs into one of these characters? Oh, we need a character. Okay, here's my name. Here's my thing. All right. Well, now it's gotten to the point where they want that character to join this character. Then is it, well, let me create these stats and then we'll go from here? Or
yeah,
does that make so?
well,
Go ahead.
yeah. So check it out. We've got the cautious and indolent. Which guy are we gonna use? The cautious yet indolent religious leader spreading the good word of the Lord. Wait, he's cautious. That actually goes well with a religious leader. Indolent, lazy, kind of ineffective. Now we really got a guy here. We got this cautious, ineffective, indolent religious leader trying to spread the good word. And we'll now say trying to spread the good word. Right? So now when you meet Jem Larimore and I role play that, you automatically want to talk to him because he's got depth. He's not just, hi, have you heard about Jesus? Have you heard about the Force? Or have you heard about Titan? You don't have to do that. That you're trying too hard at that point. But if they meet him and they ask him a question, you role play that he's a little cautious or he's a little lazy. They start to pick up on that. Man, you're no help at all. You're not telling me anything. Right. But he's real now. The rest of that, like, and they may never talk to him again, but they might remember him. So you go on and they meet another guy, and they really like him. let's say that this guy that we've created now, Jem Larimore, the religious leader who's cautious and indolent, spreading the good word. We'll say that they meet him and they actually like him. He can hang out with them. You know how to role play him. You know how he's going to respond to questions. You know he's always going to be cautious. Or he might not even want people to know that he's very cautious. That might be a thing that you come up with while you're playing him. Maybe he seeks. Maybe that's why he's a leader, because he seeks to throw that caution or that indolence out. Maybe he's trying to overcome his indolence. That could be a thing. And then write it down. When you come up with that as you're playing, write that down. It takes 2 or 3 words to give you an excellent personality. And I like to also, when I do NPCs where I'm using a voice, I like to write things about the voice I'm going to use. That way when I see it, I'll know to put gravel in my voice. I know it's low. I know it's quiet. I know it's whatever it may be. I know it's a high-pitched voice. It's a melodic voice. And each word that I use is something that I do with my voice. It's not necessarily the way it sounds to you, but it's the way that I can say it. The same thing with their traits. It's not necessarily what am I going to tell you that he is. Rather, how am I going to role play him or her?
I guess I never looked at it that way, that it's like you're only using the pieces that you need to build. You're only using the pieces that you need to use until you get to the point, and then you start using those pieces to basically build a puzzle that fleshes out the character more. Because in my mind, I'm thinking like, well, if I'm going to create these characters, then I need everything. I need stats. I need like what weapons they're handling and stuff like that, on top of what their background is and what their affiliation is and what their alignment is, and all this stuff. And what sounds
See,
like
these guys that you've created, these are shopkeepers or guys you meet at a bar or guys you meet on the street, because you know your players are going to go to a bar, and you know that they're going to look around and talk to people. They're going to gather information, and you know they're going to meet Oren Beerus and love him because he's super inappropriate and think it's hilarious. And they'll be trying to get more information out of him. You can come up with a backstory as you go. You can come up with whatever you want as you go. Just think about it this way. If you didn't create this list, we go up to the guy who's playing music at the bar and we talk to him. And you can easily go to your list and say, well, I got a musician who's huge in the list. And I've also got this guy who really loves certain type of music. Maybe it's an open mic night. Maybe he's there. It doesn't matter. Either one. You got 2 choices where you had nothing before. You had to come up with a name on the fly. You had to come up with what he's like on the fly. This is a starting point. That's all it is. These people don't have to be in your game ever. Or all of them could be in your game. Just depending on how much we talk to randoms. That's all they are, is randoms.
that's just mind-boggling to me. Like, it just blows my mind because I've never looked at it that way.
But you'll need them. And when you start to use them, you'll be so glad you put a little bit down on paper and have that to draw from to push you in a direction for role playing. So you seem magical. You like, and I go back. I always harken back when we're talking about NPCs to the Gladiator game or Familia Gladiatorium, where I had 27 NPCs and they each had their own personality, especially by the end of it. And my players who played in that game just rave about how great that those NPCs were. They just loved it because they could yell at the guy down the hall, and when he answered, they knew what to expect. And I didn't have to keep it in my head, or I didn't have to have character sheets for all of them, because they're not all going to get into fights with the characters. So, or they're not going to fight with the characters. They're not going to go adventuring. They're just there because they're there. Those guards are just there. You can have random stats for them, but the things that really make them shine are going to be how you role play them. And the little things like this that get you role playing well, it's a challenge for you to come up with all these guys, on the fly. All you're doing is giving yourself a little stepping stone.
And in reality, if I wanted to, I could create just generic templates of certain classes of characters. And then if one of these characters becomes more than what they are, I could just use those stats for whatever's convenient.
Exactly.
God, that fucking
You
blows my mind. I have never looked
and
at it that way before.
you made one stat block, like, okay, this is the kind of character that's going to go with them. Any of these guys could be that character. Any of them.
It
And it
blows my
doesn't,
mind.
the thing, like, the two things mean everything to each other and they mean nothing to each other. Stat block versus how the character acts. Because if you got a local politician looking to make it no matter what, but you need a monkey wrench kind of handyman guy, maybe that's what this guy really is. Maybe that's how he got his start, and he comes with the characters. Now you've really got a super cool character. I mean, yeah, he's a politician now, but he used to turn a wrench for a living.
Right, he could totally be that guy that was, working on the sewers and made his way up through the union and
Absolutely. Or even the religious leader. Maybe he used to turn a wrench. Or the musician. Any of them could be that guy that you want as your NPC. Let the players pick who comes. Now, I go a little deeper and I'll make stats for a few different guys if I think that they may go with the group at some point, or if I think there's going to be a fight that they get involved in. I will have stats ready ahead of time. But there's no need to do it with all of them. There's just no need. So don't waste your time. Don't make 10 stat blocks with 10 backgrounds, with 10 sets of personality traits, and 10 alignments and 10 names. Make a couple of those. And then have this. And I take this a step further. Write down a few more names with nothing. Because maybe they talk to the bartender. He's not any of these guys. So, well, now you got a bartender.
right.
And you can make him up as you go. But the rest of them, yeah, have that stepping stool prepared for yourself. It's worth it.
So I'm definitely going to go back into the locations and build more into those. I've got about 2 more I need to write down. Um, what do you think should be the next stepping stone in this?
Okay, so let's recap what we've done here. We've got our players. Well, we're gonna assume we've got our players.
Right.
We've got your overarching storyline, and now we've got some cool NPCs because you had a couple of NPCs last week, and now you got a stable of randoms. Um, so the next thing we got to start putting your plot points into locations, and how do they affect the location? How does your plot point A, if this is going to be, say, I don't know, 12 sessions long or whatever, how long is it going to take to get to plot point A? What things need to happen to get to plot point A? And what all is plot point A including? What goes with it? Because there'll likely be a whole series of events in that plot point A. You break your plot down into a few different points. Um, Let me try. I'm going to try to think of one that I've done. Uh, let's say we'll go back to A Pirate's Life. Plot point A was getting you onto a magical ship that flies to the sky. So that wasn't going to be the first thing we do. We put you guys in jail. So what led up to getting on the ship? We put you guys in jail. You're there trying to figure out when you're going to get out of jail or how you're going to get out of jail. When another guy comes in and he says, "Hey, I know that you're the jail keeper. We've talked in the past. I need people for my ship. I need deckhands. What do you got?" And of course, you guys decided to go on. So that's how I got you there. And then I knew there was going to be a chase where some guards are running after you. Somebody gets shot. I wanted those things to happen. That just added to it. And then I wanted there to be a reveal. So the big reveal was you guys couldn't see the ship from where you were. I wanted you to step into a scene where the ship's right in front of you floating, because I thought that would be a little overwhelming. And so I made sure that that ship was hidden by some things so that there would be a cool reveal, because that's what I wanted. Then when you saw the ship floating there above the ground, because it's a spell jammer, that was super neat. And some people didn't want to get on the ship. And I wanted to instill that in you guys, that there was fear among some of the NPCs. And then when you got on the ship, who did you meet? So now we talk about those NPCs. How do these NPCs affect this area? How do they affect this scene? What kind of things are going to be said? If you can anticipate just a little bit in advance, we're going to work those things together. We're going to start putting the pieces down so that we get our first session. And that's what we're going to work on for next week, is what are you going to put into your first session?
Thanks for listening to this episode of the DnD420 podcast. For everything DnD420 related, check out DnD420.com. If you'd like to reach out to us, you can find us there on the website and on YouTube at DnD420. Lastly, as always, if you'd like to support the show, you can do that by telling another DM about the show and by visiting us on Apple Podcasts and leaving a rating and review. Thanks for subscribing and being a part of our work here at DnD420. We will see you next week.